Shoot! I'm with the science team!
Hello, and today we're going to be going over the book Tools of Critical Thinking, Metathoughts for Psychology, 2nd edition by David A. Levy. And the previous video I had read chapters 2 and 3. So we are going to be continuing. And the way I actually found out about this book, I was on the program that was a previous TV show in the 1980s, I think. New Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove. I was in a live stream that they were holding, and they had, live chat, and I was in the chat, and I asked, is there any self-study books that you believe would be a good addition to, I guess, my own study? And they had recommended me this book, one person in chat, and I forgot her name. I would say thank you, but I don't remember. But thank you. So, here we go. Chapter 4, The Nominal Fallacy and Tautologist Reasoning. To name something isn't to explain it. And we have quotes, Arthur Block. Just because your doctor has a name for your condition doesn't mean he knows what it is. And another quote, second quote actually, by R.D. Lang. There must be something the matter with him because he would not be acting as he does unless there was. Therefore, he's acting as he is because there's something the matter with him. The nominal fallacy. Words are so important to us that if we can find, formulate, or invent a special name for something, we easily fool ourselves into believing that we have explained it. This error is called the nominal fallacy. Given that descriptive labels are an essential component both of science and of everyday life, we need to be aware that naming any particular behavior, such as with a diagnostic label, does not, therefore, explain the behavior. Here are some examples of the nominal fallacy. Why does she have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep? Because she's got insomnia. Next line over. Why is the boy chronically disobedient toward authority figures? Next line. Because he's got oppositional defiant disorder, and so on. And that's the end of that. And then tautologist reasoning. The nominal fallacy typically involves circular or tautological reasoning. A tautology, is an unnecessary repetition of an idea or statement using different words that essentially mean the same thing twice. For example, people who care about others have empathy. Therefore, people who have empathy care about others. Right. Or people who display gross impairment in reality testing are psychotic. Therefore, people who are psychotic display gross impairment in reality testing. Yes. Statements that comprise an argument in a tautology are constructed in such a way that the truth of the proposition is guaranteed and therefore cannot be falsified. For instance, For instance, wherever you go, there you are is tautological. It is what it is tautological. If you can't find something you've lost, you aren't looking in the right place is tautological. Although the statements are true, the conclusions convey no useful information. Similarly, the Yiddish maxim, as die Bobe, volt gehat Beitism, volt sie geben, mein Zaidi, and then parentheses, if grandmother had testicles, she would be my grandfather, is true, but, parentheses, intentionally pointless. Here are some other illustrations of tautologist reasoning. Why is that guy so sociable? Because he's an extrovert. How do you know that he's an extrovert? Well, you can see how sociable he is. And so on. All of that. These kinds of circular explanations are, of course, no explanations at all. It's like explaining a bright child's low grades by declaring that he or she is an underachiever. Similarly, a diagnosis of depression does not explain profound sadness. A diagnosis of alcohol dependence does not explain drinking problems. A diagnosis of schizophrenia does not explain delusions and hallucinations. A diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder does not explain extreme grandiosity. And a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder does not explain someone's severe problems with their interpersonal relationships. Exercise 4-1, another exercise. So be prepared to interact yourself, your own brain, right here. Exercise 4-1. Try completing the following tautological dialogues. Why does she firmly cling to her false beliefs despite obvious evidence to the contrary? Because she's got delusional disorder. How do you know that she's got delusional disorder? And then another blank. So this is where people need to fill it in, but I got my book from Goodwill, and I'm upset that this person has already written in this book, but I guess it makes it easier to explain to you and kind of convey it. So, because she's got delusional disorder. How do you know she's got delusional disorder? And then the person wrote, because she has delusional beliefs. I don't see it. I see it as pretty simple. You know, you're kind of catching on to what's going on. It's pretty easy, 1-2. Almost like explaining to a child how easy this is. Why does that man persistently have an absence of any sexual drive? Because he's got hypoactive sexual desire disorder. How do you know that he's got hypoactive sexual desire disorder? And then they wrote, because he has no sexual desires, and so on. It's 1-2. For a final illustration of this metathought, do your best to navigate through the mind-bending tautologies in the following, and then parentheses, catch dash 22, like discourse. Catch dash 22 like discourse. The man who has been found guilty of first-degree murder is asking for the death penalty. He must, therefore, be crazy, since only someone who is crazy would ask for the death penalty. But we don't administer the death penalty to people who are crazy. Therefore, since he asked to be executed, we cannot have him executed. If, on the other hand, he had asked not to receive the death penalty, then we could give him the death penalty, since we only execute people who aren't crazy. And anybody who doesn't want to be executed obviously isn't crazy. Thus, if he requests the death penalty, that proves he's crazy. So we can't sentence him to death. And it's repetition. It's just over and over the same scenario. I hope you guys are following along with what they're putting down. It's exactly that. Just why? This is why. Well, why? This is why. 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's just 1, 2, 1, 2. It's, in summary, do not confuse a name with an explanation. Remember that labeling something does not per se explain it. Finally, learn to recognize tautologist reasoning. Remind yourself that although tautologies may have the appearance of being logical, they are in fact an invalid method of proof. And the notes, Murphy's Law, Book 2, 1980, and Knott's, 1970, and so on, the notes. And glossary terms. And now we're on Chapter 5, differentiating dichotomous variables and continuous variables, black and white or shades of gray. This is something I will be interested in, so let's read. Oh, and we have a quote from the Bible. He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth. arithmetic. That's math to figure out. Not really, but explaining too much. Harry Stack Sullivan, a quote by him, and it's actually the second quote that we gotten from him, and I don't remember the first one. In approaching the subject of mental disorder, I must emphasize, in my view, persons showing mental disorder do not manifest anything specifically different in kind from what is manifested by practically all human beings. That's a pretty good one. And a quote from Aldous Huxley: sanity is a matter of degree. I actually very much agree with that. Okay, conceptualizing phenomena. Part 1, hold on. Is that really? Variables. It says part 1, conceptualizing phenomena, right next to the page numbers, so I'm just going to read that just to read it. Some phenomena in the world may be divided or bifurcated into two mutually exclusive or contradictory categories. These types of phenomena are dichotomous variables. For example, when you flip a coin, it must turn up either heads or tails. There is no middle ground. Similarly, a woman cannot be a little bit, somewhat, or moderately pregnant. She is either pregnant or not pregnant. Here are some other examples. A light switch is either on or off. A basketball either goes through the hoop or it doesn't. A neuron either fires or does not fire, parentheses, the all or none principle. A person is either male or female, parentheses, with some rare exceptions. Other phenomena, by contrast, consist of a theoretical infinite number of points lying between two polar opposites. These types of phenomena are continuous variables. For example, between the extremes of black and white, there consists a middle ground comprised in innumerable shades of gray. Consider also the measure of distance, weight, volume, motion, or temperature. In these cases, the result may fall at any point along a range, spectrum, or dimension, and are expressed in terms of quantity, magnitude, or degree. The problem is that we often confuse these two types of variables. Specifically, we have a tendency to dichotomize variables that more accurately should be conceptualized as continuous. In particular, most person-related phenomena, parentheses, especially psychological constructs, are frequently presumed to fit into into one or two discrete types, either category A or B, rather than as lying along a continuum, somewhere between point A and B. In the vast majority of cases, however, continuous variables are more accurate and therefore more useful representations of the phenomena we are attempting to describe and explain. The following are some examples of continuous psychological variables that frequently are assumed to be or treated as if they were dichotomous: normal and abnormal, mental health and mental illness, introvert, extrovert, autonomous, dependent, trust, mistrust, sexist, non-sexist, individualism and collectivism, acculturated and unacculturated, conscious and unconscious, functional, dysfunctional, adaptive, maladaptive, therapeutic success, therapeutic failure, scientifically useful and scientifically not useful. Differentiating, page 27, differentiating dichotomous variables and continuous variables. And we have a chart actually that shows A and B, and then there's the gray in the middle. And the next one that says dichotomous variable. And then the next one is a continuous variable, and it shows almost like a color graph, a color gradient, where it's going from black and then shading into gray and then going into white. on both ends, black and white, but in the middle is the shades that create the contrast. I don't think contrast is the right word, but I hope you understand what I mean. I'm gonna show you right there. Yes. Exercise 5-1. The following exercise will give you some practice at differentiating dichotomous and continuous phenomena. For each of the terms below, indicate those that refer to dichotomous phenomena, D, and those that refer to continuous phenomena, C. Answers appear in Appendix 5. Rich and poor. They said C, continuous phenomena. Young and old, that will be a C again. Competitive, cooperative, that is another C. Male, female, they wrote D. And dichotomous is black and white, 1 or 2. Continuous has to be more than that, shades of gray. So rich and poor, yes, that is a C. It's not as black and white as that is. Young and old, yes, that is not black and white. There is no setting factor to a young and old person. Competitive, cooperative, yes, C. There's more to it. Male, female, D. That is something that's either one side or the other in the eyes of what they are saying themselves right here. They said it earlier on in this book, earlier on in the text, that that's a dichotomous variable, which is D. So, and so on. They keep going. Let me see if I see any that I like. I don't know. Nothing really stuck out to me. Okay. Theoretical and clinical applications. In terms of psychological theory, the process of false dichotomization is illustrated in the ego defense mechanism of splitting. In explaining early childhood development, some neo-Freudians, e.g., Klein, 1937, Mailer, Pine, and Bergman, 1975, have authorized that the child both wishes for, yet is hostile and fearful toward, the maternal object. According to these theorists, the child attempts to resolve this conflict by categorizing or splitting the world into good versus bad components by treating them in an all or none fashion. Adults, too, may manifest the same defense mechanism, which these theorists interpret as representing fixation at a more primitive level of psychological development. This metathought also has numerous applications to the practice of psychotherapy. A common goal of cognitive therapy approaches, for instance, is to help clients modify their black or white thinking into seeing more shades of gray. That's pretty interesting. I actually do have a cognitive therapy little worksheet that my therapist gave me, and I plan on making a video about it. So if you would like to see that, I will be doing it, so expect it. A person with an eating disorder may learn to recognize and moderate such dichotomous thinking patterns as fat or thin, perfect or imperfect, and success or failure. To improve interpersonal communication and reduce defensiveness, clients in couples therapy may be encouraged to refrain from making dichotomous accusations, such as "you always" or "you never." People struggling with depression may utilize the simple tool of rating their mood on a continuum. Yeah. And then parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, a quote. On a scale of 1 to 10, from 1 to 10, how am I feeling today? To help them break away from the dichotomous self-assessments, and then the more parentheses, Am I depressed or not depressed today? Oh man, to help them break away from dichotomy. Oh, here, I'll read it without the parentheses. People struggling with depression may utilize the simple tool of rating their mood on a continuum away from dichotomous self-assessments. By learning to view their situation in less absolute and therefore more realistic terms, clients can gain a greater sense of acceptance, flexibility, and control over their lives. In this regard, remember that although receiving or assigning a psychological diagnosis is a dichotomous act, the psychological condition that underlies the diagnosis is virtually always a matter of degree. This is some good information, actually. All right, one second. Next, we have chapter 6. Consider the opposite. To contrast is to define. A quote from Carl G. Jung. There can be no reality without polarity. I'd have to think about that. I have no idea. A quote by Niels Bohr, which is his second quote in this book. A great truth is one whose opposite is also true. And a quote by William Shakespeare. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. I don't know what that means. Consider the opposite. In order to define or understand any given phenomenon, its theoretical opposite also should, whenever possible, be addressed and explored. How can we possibly define the concept of mental illness, for example, without also addressing what we mean by mental health? How can we define introversion in the absence of defining extroversion? Can we ever truly understand conformity without also understanding dissent? This same principle holds true for scores of other psychological opposites: depression and happiness, optimism and pessimism, intelligence and stupidity, selfishness and altruism, responsibility and irresponsibility, infidelity and faithfulness, adaptive and maladaptive, functional and dysfunctional. As these examples illustrate, to contrast a phenomenon with its polar opposite is to give definition to both terms. Just as thesis and antithesis can't be understood in isolation from each other, all polar opposites are dependent upon each other for their very conceptual existence. What is the meaning of feminine without masculine, unconscious, and so on? Without one conceptually speaking, its opposite ceases to exist. The concept of polar opposites in the human condition is a theme that runs throughout the writings of the Swiss psychiatrist Carl G. Jung. According to Jung, within every personality there is a multiplicity of conflicting, sometimes complementary, but usually opposing forces. Jung, 1921 to 1971, utilizes the term enantiodromia, taken from the 5th century Greek philosopher Heraclitus, to refer to these polar opposites. The term enantiodromia to refer to these polar opposites. Jung believed that the failure to recognize the opposite tendencies within ourselves leads inevitably to the feeling of being torn apart. Thus, to live a whole and healthy life, we must learn to accept and integrate an inherent enantiodromia. The historical development of psychological theory and research on attitude change provides a very interesting illustration of this metathought. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Beginning in the 1940s and subsequently for many years, the predominant theme in social psychology was, how can we cause attitude change? In the late 1950s, William McGuire shed a different light on this problem and inspired a new direction in thinking simply by posing the opposite question. How can we resist attitude change? This led McGuire to develop his inoculation theory of attitude change, which essentially proposed that people are more resistant to the effects of persuasive communications after having been exposed to weak counterarguments. Had McGuire not bothered to consider the opposite, his innovative insights and important contributions might never have been realized. Sigmund Freud certainly considered the opposite when he conceptualized the ego defense mechanism of reaction formation, which involves the unconscious transformation of unacceptable impulses into their opposite and thus more acceptable forms. I'll reread that. Sigmund Freud certainly considered the opposite when he conceptualized the ego defense mechanism of reaction formation, which involves the unconscious transformation of unacceptable impulses into their opposite and thus more acceptable forms. For instance, a mother who unconsciously harbors aggressive feelings toward her son may be excessively concerned for his welfare and safety, or a religious leader who appears to be vehemently anti-pornography may be unconsciously motivated by the very sexual desires against which he's publicly crusading. In like manner, a politician, yes, and so on. Considering the opposite has a number of useful applications in the clinical setting. Considering the opposite has a number of useful applications in the clinical setting. Many techniques in Gestalt therapy, for instance, are designed to help clients confront and thereby integrate their inner opposites and polarities. If a psychotherapy client feels torn between his desire for change versus his fear of change, the Gestalt therapist might ask him to role-play a dialogue between these opposite sets of feelings when faced with a client who protests. Too much, methinks, the callback from the Shakespeare quote, that she has no need whatsoever for an intimate relationship. The therapist may ask her to explore the part of herself that might, in fact, have such a need. Similarly, a client who adamantly professes nothing but disdain for his mother may be encouraged to examine what he likes about his mother. In these cases and countless more, taking a few moments to consider the opposite frequently leads to very important therapeutic discoveries. Yes, I agree with that. I do agree. A fascinating illustration of this metathought is the clinical technique of prescribing the symptom or paradoxal intention, in which a therapist gives a client a directive that he or she actually wants resisted. The resulting change takes place as a consequence of the client defying the therapist. This technique is utilized to undermine clients' resistance to change. Paradoxically, instructing them not to change, or even deliberately engage in the unwanted or undesirable behaviors. Man, they're playing mind games. In effect, the therapist's directives are precisely the opposite of the desired goal. For instance, a paranoid patient might be urged to become more suspicious. Or a married couple entering therapy with the complaint that they fight too much may be directed to go home and argue for 3 hours twice daily for 1 week, and so on. Here, I'll read. To take another example, how might we caution a person of things to avoid as a patient in psychotherapy? Utilizing this technique, we might prescribe the exact opposite behavior by imparting the paradoxical instructions. How to be a good psychotherapy patient. Okay. There is a multitude of books and articles devoted to teaching people how to become effective psychotherapists. However, there is a dearth of literature on how to become a good psychotherapy patients. How to become good psychotherapy patients. The purpose of this essay is to offer you some practical guidelines, suggestions, and techniques that can help you to make the most out of your psychotherapy experience. Conducting yourself in the psychotherapy session. 20 easy do's and don'ts. By far, the most challenging and yet potentially most entertaining aspect of being a psychotherapy patient concerns your relationship with your psychotherapist. It is crucial from the opening moments of that first phone call that you get your therapist to like you, to become dependent on you, and to become convinced that only he has the power to cure you. While your therapist is busy delving deep into the inner recesses of your psyche, just follow these 20 easy to learn techniques, and in virtually no time at all, you'll have him or her eating out of the palm of your hand. Why did they word it like that? If I'm there for help in psychotherapy, why are they wording it like I want my therapist to eat out my hand? Or information, maybe? Information gathering? I have no idea. Number 1. Do attribute all of your success to your therapist and all failures to yourself. Do gaze reverently into your therapist's eyes as he pontificates about the nature of the human condition. Do occasionally confuse something that your therapist said with something that Einstein said. Do complain about insensitive and judgmental parents, teachers, and especially prior psychotherapists. Do apologize profusely to your therapist for not showing faster improvement. Do casually inform your therapist that you're due to come into large sums of money into the near future. Do at random moments say to your therapist, you really care about me, don't you? Do tell your therapist that you passed up a week in Tahiti just so you wouldn't have to miss your therapy session. And then don't point out that your therapist constantly contradicts himself. Don't embarrass your therapist by waking him up when he dozes off in the middle of your session. Don't tell your therapist that his mind is obviously on everything else in the world other than what you're saying. I may have lost track, but I don't understand what's going on. It's easy to understand what they're saying, and they're saying like hold them to power and just don't step on toes, be a good person, be kind is what they're saying. But I don't understand what maybe I'll secondary gains and fringe benefits. Getting the maximum mileage from being a psychotherapy patient. Irrespective of what actually happens or doesn't happen in the course of psychotherapy, the very fact of being a psychotherapy patient can offer you powerful leverage in all of your interpersonal relationships. Here are 4 easy pointers. 1, hide behind diagnostic labels. You can definitely absolve yourself of all personal responsibilities for your annoying habits and obnoxious behavior by cloaking yourself in psychological diagnosis. For example, if someone is in any way critical of something you've done, just retort, "Hey, what do you expect from me? I'm a passive, dependent personality type with low-grade, uncrystallized, borderline personality features. Use therapy against your mate." Why are they telling me all of this? Okay, 2, use therapy against your mate. 3, get back at your parents. I think this is possibly if you weren't to take the opposite into consideration. I think this is what they're saying. But let me go over it though. Oh, yes. Instructing them not to change, engage in the unwanted or undesirable behaviors. Yes. Okay. Impress your friends. A final word. Remember that it's not easy to become a good psychotherapy patient. Millions of people never learn. But don't get discouraged. Trust that you can do it. Make these strategies a part of your life, and you're well on the way to complete recovery and true mental health. Okay. I understand. Exercise 6-1, toward the resolution and of interpersonal conflicts. In the personal social context, the principle of considering the opposite can be utilized to increase one's understanding of and empathy for other people's point of view. As an exercise, select 3 specific issues, whether socio-cultural, political, moral, legal, and so on, about which you feel particularly strong. Now, for each issue, take the perspective of someone with the opposite attitude or opinion and write out as persuasively as you can from their vantage point the reasons, the arguments, and feelings pertaining to their position. Issue 1, and this is what this other person said, so we're kind of getting a little peek at what they wrote for this. Issue 1, access to birth control. Oh man. Your attitude: birth control should be easily accessible. Opposite perspective: there should be limitations with access to birth control, and birth control should not be cheap/free. She didn't go, I don't think she tried hard enough with that one. I don't think she meant what she said. I don't think she truly did what they asked to do. Issue number 2, pit bull ban in certain towns. Your attitude: no ban should exclude one specific breed because of poor ownership. And then she put parentheses, ban the owner. That's foolish. What are you talking about? How are you going to ban the owner? Opposite perspective: pit bulls are a strong breed that shouldn't be owned by just anybody. With no proper training, they may be aggressive to people and other animals. Issue number 3, college meal plans. Your attitude: meal plans are too expensive, plus gross. Opposite perspective: meal plans on college give students a chance on how to spend their money, plus they are reasonably priced. In reflecting on your responses to this exercise, briefly enumerate the potential values of viewing these issues from opposite perspectives. She wrote, you can gain insight of why someone thinks otherwise. Everyone has different views on subjects. Last, identify some particular instances or situations in which utilizing this method of considering the opposite may contribute to the successful resolution of interpersonal conflict. She wrote, people can come to a middle ground and understand what values others share. Yes. And that's the end of chapter 6. I'm going to leave it at that. We are almost at 40 minutes. And probably with me talking, we're going to reach 40 minutes on this video. So, yes, that was chapters 4, 5, and... No. Wait. Oh, my God. I may have read a lot. Last time I read chapters 2 and 3. So I read chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. 4. Oh my gosh. Yes, 4 chapters this time. I hope you guys, follow along well. Today I did share a drink with you guys. So, if you're drinking, cheers. I don't know how you guys be studying, but I drank a little bit and I'm feeling okay. I was having a hard time reading a little bit, so I hope that didn't get in the way too much. But I hope you're following along in your book and then seeing like, man, he's not saying what's written down right here. I like that. I'd be like that. I'd be like, man, that's not what you said. That's not what you said. But I hope you like my shirt as well, and I appreciate you viewing this video. Let me know if I should continue next time sober, maybe. That'd probably be a better idea. But thank you and good day.